Welcome back to Byte-Sized Tech, where we kind of skip the tech jargon and try to make sense of what's going on. Lately, it feels like, I don't know, the tech world's having a bit of an identity crisis. Like, are they changing, or is it just like a PR makeover?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people are asking that.
Exactly. So we thought we'd take a deep dive into a few key areas, see what's really going on. We're going to look at how companies are approaching diversity and inclusion these days. And then we'll jump into the always evolving world of cybersecurity. And finally, are investors finally looking beyond those big tech giants, the Mag 7 and all that? Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right, first up, diversity and inclusion. It feels like things have gotten kind of quiet, right? Remember like a couple of years ago, every company was shouting their DEI initiatives from the rooftops.
Yeah, you're right. Definitely a shift. I think some of it is, the political and social climate, but also I think there's this growing realization that real change goes way deeper than just like flashy campaigns and acronyms.
So less talk, more action.
Exactly. Companies are starting to get that building a truly inclusive workplace, it takes more than just surface level stuff. It's about like fostering a culture where everyone feels valued and respected and has equal opportunities.
Right, so if they're not talking about it as much, how do companies make sure their employees and potential hires even know they're actually committed to diversity and inclusion?
Well, that's where actions speak louder than words, right? Like instead of just saying the right things, they got to walk the walk. Things like fair promotion practices, inclusive hiring processes, robust parental leave policies. Those are concrete examples.
Yeah, those are the things that really impact people's lives. It's not just checking boxes. It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels supported and empowered.
Absolutely. And when employees feel that way, they're more engaged, more productive, more likely to stay with the company. So it's not just the right thing to do, it's good for business too.
Win-win. Okay, so companies are shifting their approach to diversity and inclusion. What's next on our tech agenda?
Let's talk about cybersecurity. It's an area where, we've seen huge increases in spending, but it seems like the vulnerabilities are just as persistent.
It's true. It feels like every other day there's a new data breach or cyber attack in the headlines. Why are companies struggling so much to stay ahead?
Well, part of the problem is just the sheer complexity of it all. A lot of companies are overwhelmed by the number of different security tools and products they're using. The average chief information security officer is juggling over 50 different security products.
50. Wow, that's a lot to keep track of. No wonder things slip through the cracks.
Exactly. All those separate systems create inefficiencies and gaps that, cyber criminals are more than happy to exploit. That's why we're seeing this big push towards consolidation.
Consolidation. You mean instead of having all those different solutions, companies are moving towards more integrated platforms?
Exactly. The trend is moving towards consolidating around three core platforms: endpoint security, cloud security, and network security. This strengthens their defenses, but also simplifies things for the security teams.
Okay, so streamlining things, making it easier to spot and respond to threats. I bet venture capitalists are loving this trend. I've been reading about all these massive funding rounds for cybersecurity startups, some exceeding $200 million. Plus all the mergers and acquisitions happening in the cybersecurity world.
Yeah, you're right on the money. Investors see the urgent need for better cybersecurity solutions, and they're pouring money into companies that can deliver. This is driving innovation and speeding up the development of new technologies like Secure Access Service Edge, or SACE, and Security Service Edge, or SSE.
Okay, wait, whoa, hold on. Too many acronyms. Can you break those down for our listeners? What are SACE and SSE, and why should we care?
Sure. Basically, they're all about moving away from those traditional hardware-based security solutions and going towards more cloud-based approaches. It's about securing access to apps and data no matter where they are, whether it's the cloud, on-premises, or on someone's device.
So it's about being more agile, more adaptable in how we approach security.
Precisely. And that's crucial these days when the cyber threats are always changing. Instead of relying on fixed perimeter defenses, this lets companies create a dynamic security perimeter that follows the user and the data.
Sounds pretty revolutionary. It's like having a security detail that travels with you everywhere. But what does this mean for businesses long term? Should they be ditching all their old security hardware and going all in on the cloud?
Well, it's not going to happen overnight. This transition to cloud-based security will take time. But over the next, say, 5 to 7 years, we're expecting to see a significant shift away from that legacy hardware towards the cloud-centric solutions.
So we're talking a pretty major change in how companies handle cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a big shift and one that businesses need to start preparing for now.
So on that note, let me ask you this. How secure do you think your own digital life is? Are you relying on a bunch of different apps and tools, or have you thought about a more integrated approach?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. We should all be mindful of our digital security and take steps to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay, so we talked about diversity and inclusion. We've looked at cybersecurity. Now let's get into our final topic for this segment. Investing. We all know about those Mag 7 companies, right? Meta, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Tesla. They've been dominating the market for years. But is it time for investors to start looking beyond those tech giants?
It's a question that's coming up more and more. Even financial advisors are wrestling with it. Those companies have had amazing returns, but there's always a risk of too much concentration. Putting all your eggs in one basket, as they say.
Yeah, you don't want to be caught off guard if things suddenly change. So, what are financial advisors telling their clients? Are they saying to move away from big tech?
A lot of them are encouraging clients to diversify. That means looking beyond just U.S. tech giants and considering things like international markets, small cap stocks, even alternative assets.
Makes sense, spreading the risk around. But how do you escape the pull of those massive companies? They're so influential, but even active fund managers have trouble deviating too far from the standard benchmarks.
It's a real challenge. One strategy is to think about the tech sector in more specific terms, Instead of lumping it all together, segment it into categories like software, hardware, enterprise solutions, and consumer-facing tech.
So instead of betting on the big names overall, look for opportunities within those niches.
Exactly. You can still tap into the growth potential of the tech industry, but without being overly concentrated in just a few companies. It's a more nuanced approach and hopefully less risky.
That sounds pretty smart. So it's not about giving up on tech altogether, it's being more strategic. But what about other sectors? Are investors looking beyond tech for growth?
Well, one sector that's definitely attracting attention is energy. Global demand is increasing, and there are opportunities in both renewable and conventional energy sources.
So it's not just about the latest gadgets and software. Investors are looking at the bigger picture, those long-term global needs.
Absolutely. And that brings up an interesting question. How are investors approaching this sector given the push for sustainability? Is it all about wind and solar, or are traditional sources still in play?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, right? How are investors approaching energy given, the whole sustainability thing?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we're in this huge transition, but you can't just abandon fossil fuels overnight.
It really is a mix. I mean, there's a lot of excitement, and for good reason, around renewable energy, wind and solar and all that. But the reality is that oil and gas are still vital. They're not going away anytime soon.
So it's not a black and white situation, huh? It's about finding that balance between meeting those immediate needs while also investing in like the long-term future of clean energy.
You've got it. And that's what makes energy so interesting right now. There's potential on both sides, from making traditional energy production more efficient to developing and scaling up those new renewable technologies. It's like a whole other tech revolution happening inside the energy sector. But with so much going on, how do investors even begin to make sense of it all? What should they be considering when they're looking at energy investments?
Well, one of the most important things to keep in mind is government policy. Over the last few years, we've seen some interesting developments. Governments around the world are putting policies in place to support both renewable and conventional energy development.
So it's not just about the technology itself. You have to understand, like, the politics and economics that are shaping the whole industry.
Absolutely. Things like government incentives, regulations, long-term energy plans. Investors really need to pay attention to those because they can have a huge impact on whether an investment is profitable or not.
It's definitely more complicated than just picking a few stocks and hoping for the best.
You got that right. Energy investing, like any investing, it requires a solid understanding of the industry, the technology, and as we said, the global political landscape. But for those who are willing to put in the time and effort, there can be significant rewards.
All right, so we've talked about diversifying beyond those big tech names. We've explored the energy sector. Now, let's circle back to something we touched on before, this whole debate between growth and value investing. It seems like growth stocks, especially in tech, have been the darlings of the market for years. But is that trend changing? Are we seeing a resurgence of interest in value investing?
Yeah, that's a great observation, and it's definitely a hot topic in the investment world. We've been in this prolonged period of growth stock dominance, but with interest rates going up and concerns about inflation, some investors are turning their attention to value stocks.
Can you break that down for us? For someone who's new to this, what exactly makes a stock a growth stock versus a value stock, and why might this shift be happening now?
Sure. So growth stocks, they're usually associated with companies that are expected to grow at a rate that's, faster than average. They often plow their earnings back into the business to fuel that growth, so they might not pay dividends. Think of like those high-flying tech companies we were talking about. Value stocks, on the other hand, are considered undervalued by the market. They might have strong earnings right now and lower valuations compared to those growth companies.
So growth stocks are like betting on future potential. And value stocks are about finding those hidden gems that the market might be overlooking.
That's a really good way to put it. And the reason some investors are looking at value stocks now is because historically they tend to do better when interest rates are higher. When rates go up, it gets more expensive for companies to borrow money, which can make it harder to invest in growth. And that can affect those growth stocks. Value stocks, with their focus on current earnings, they might be seen as a safer bet under those conditions.
So it's a bit of a balancing act for investors, trying to anticipate where the market is going and adjust their strategies. But with so many factors involved, economic conditions, interest rates, inflation, even just how people are feeling about the market, it's like trying to predict the weather.
It definitely is complex, but like always, the most important thing is to stay informed, understand those economic trends, and build a diversified portfolio that can handle whatever the market throws at it. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, and don't just chase whatever the hot trend is at the moment. Do your research, make informed decisions based on your goals and your own risk tolerance.
Solid advice. So thinking back through all this, from diversifying away from those big tech names to energy investing to the growth versus value debate, it really feels like both the tech world and the investment landscape are in constant motion, always changing. Is this a real, fundamental script, or is it just a temporary blip?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think what we're seeing is a bunch of things coming together at once. Technological advancements, shifts in corporate culture, global economic forces, all of these are reshaping the world as we know it.
It really does feel like a massive transformation, not just in technology, but in how we think about business, society, even ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. And the pace of change is only going to speed up. What's so interesting is that we're not just watching this happen, we're a part of it. The decisions we make now are going to determine what that future looks like.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What's the one thing they should remember from all this?
Stay curious, keep asking questions, keep looking for new information and new perspectives. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions, to consider different points of view, and to really think critically about the role technology plays in our lives.
Great advice. Stay engaged, stay informed, keep learning. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more area I want to touch on. It's been all over the headlines lately, and it's both incredibly exciting and a little bit unnerving. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, or AI.
Ah, yes, AI. It's a field that holds so much promise but also comes with some understandable anxieties, right?
Exactly. I mean, we've seen these amazing breakthroughs, AI being used in healthcare, transportation, entertainment, just about every field you can imagine. But there are these growing concerns about the ethical implications, things like jobs being lost, privacy violations, even the potential for AI to become something we can't control.
You're absolutely right. It's a powerful tool, and like any powerful tool, we have to be careful how we use it.
So where do we even start with something this big? It feels like such a complex issue with so many different angles to consider.
You're right, it's not simple, but I think one of the most important starting points is to have open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of AI. We can't just bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best. We need to get everyone involved in these discussions, ethicists, policymakers, and the public. We have to make sure that the development of AI is guided by a set of shared values and principles.
So we need to move beyond just the hype and the fear and have a more nuanced conversation about what AI really means for our future.
I think that's crucial. We have to approach AI with a sense of both optimism and caution, acknowledge the potential it has while being mindful of the risks that come along with it.
It's a balancing act for sure, but it's one we can't afford to ignore.
I agree. The future of AI is being shaped right now, and it's up to all of us to ensure it's a future that we can all embrace.
Well, on that thought-provoking note, I think we're going to have to wrap up this part of our deep dive, but don't worry, we'll be back soon for the final part where we'll explore the world of AI in more depth and look at those ethical challenges and opportunities we've been talking about. Welcome back to Byte-Sized Tech. We're wrapping up our deep dive today, and last time things got pretty thought-provoking. We were talking about, well, the future, really. Specifically, the future with AI.
Yeah, it feels like AI is everywhere these days, but it's also changing so fast it's hard to keep up.
It really is. We talked about all the amazing things it can do, but also those ethical concerns that come along with it. How do we make sure AI is used to benefit everyone, not make those inequalities worse?
That's the big question, right? And as AI becomes even more powerful, more woven into everything we do, those ethical questions are only going to get more urgent.
So where do we even start? It feels like such a massive, complicated issue.
It is complicated, but I think the foundation have to be transparency. We have to be able to see how these AI systems work, how they make decisions, what data they're using. Without that, there can't be any real trust, no accountability.
Yeah, it's like that classic black box problem. If you don't know what's going on inside, how can you trust what comes out? But even with transparency, how do we guarantee AI is being used ethically? How do we stop bias from creeping into those algorithms?
That's a huge challenge, and there's no easy answer. The first step is being incredibly careful about the data that's used to train those systems. If the data itself is biased, the AI is going to learn those biases.
Garbage in, garbage out. But even with good data, that's not enough, is it?
Not even close. Even with data that's diverse and representative, we need to constantly be checking those AI systems, looking for any signs of bias, and be ready to jump in and correct things.
So it's like a constant process, always being vigilant. It feels like we need a whole new rule book for AI, a set of ethical guidelines specifically for how it's built and used.
We absolutely do. And thankfully, those conversations are starting to happen. There are organizations all over the world working on those ethical frameworks, and governments are starting to figure out the regulations needed for this rapidly changing technology.
That's good to hear, but even so, there's still a lot of anxiety about AI, right? And it's not just from watching too many sci-fi movies. People are worried about their jobs, their privacy, AI becoming so powerful that we can't control it anymore.
Those are all legitimate concerns, and it's important that we don't dismiss them.
So when people worry about jobs being replaced by robots, that's not an irrational fear.
It's a real issue. We need to start thinking now about how we prepare people for the jobs that'll exist in an AI-driven future, and how we support those who are displaced by automation.
So the tech is just part of the story. The bigger question is how we adapt as a society.
Exactly. AI is more than just a technology revolution, it's a society one. We have to rethink everything from education to social safety nets, even our understanding of what it means to be human in a world where AI is so prominent.
Wow, that's deep. It feels like we're only at the very, very beginning of this whole AI journey.
We are, and that's both exciting and, yeah, a little bit scary. There's so much we still don't know, so many challenges and opportunities that are still to come.
It's like we're explorers setting out into this completely unknown territory. As we've seen in this whole deep dive, the questions we're facing go way beyond just the technology. They're about our work, our relationships, our values, even how we see the world.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to keep learning, to keep asking those tough questions, to never stop being curious.
Well said. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought. Technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad. The future of tech isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make every day.
I couldn't agree more.
So let's use it wisely. Let's use technology to build a future that benefits all of us. A future that's fairer, more sustainable. A future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thanks for tuning in to Byte-Sized Tech. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more fun tech conversations.